to know, so I'm going to go ahead and start the recording now. There we go. All right, so as I said, just so you'll have it if you're interested, this is the link if you want to try the interactive version. If you're not up for that, no worries, you'll still be able to see my screen. I don't think you're going to need a login, but again, this is something that I'm trying new. So if it doesn't work, we have a plan B. So I appreciate everybody joining this morning. This is definitely not a topic that people are super overjoyed to learn about. So we are going to do the best we can to get through it. I will say that I am not a lawyer, so I'm not going to claim to have all the answers, but you know, just know that we're all in this together, and hopefully we can get some clarity on some of the things that apply to all of us. So let's get started. Hopefully, let's see. Hopefully it'll work. Of course, that's what I get for trying something new on here, right? Here we go. All right, so Kathy is going to handle the chat for me. Again, as I said, I don't have all the answers, but I am going to share what I do know and the links to the original information. These are acronyms that you have probably heard of. You might know about some of them, and you might not. That's you know, that's just where we all happen to be at the moment. But we're going to hopefully share some useful information that will make you more informed and moving forward. Let me add this additional person who just signed up and get started. Okay, so CIPA, COPPA, FERPA, and HIPAA, what in the world are they and why should we care about it? There is, hopefully on your screen, you can see this, if it works. Hopefully you can see this, and I'm going to go through the student view in case you didn't want to use the interactive. Do you feel like you have a firm understanding of CIPA, know a little bit about it, or have no idea what it is? All right, so we have some in the middle and some who are just learning about it. So that's cool. This is, anytime you see this color link, and I will share the presentation also, that will take you directly to the legislation itself. So let me show it on this screen because I'm a little nervous about the Nearpod experience that I haven't tried before. So if you go to this link, you will see the legislation in its entirety. I always as a teacher told my kids to make sure that they didn't take my word for it, that they always went back and checked primary sources if possible, or multiple reliable sources. And I would tell you to do the same thing with any information you're given. Always go back and look at the original. And if you're not clear on something, please feel comfortable enough finding somebody to ask. So CIPA stands for the Children's Internet Protection Act. I know this is kind of wordy and I'm not going to read this to you, but just to sum it up, it's been in effect for 20 years. So it was kind of shocking when I came out of the classroom that I wasn't aware of it, and that I thought more people might have been in the same situation as myself. But it is extremely important for not just the obvious reasons to protect our kids online, but also because it directly impacts our E-rate funding. If you've ever wondered how we pay for internet and quite a bit of our infrastructure for our network, we get a certain allotment of E-rate discount funding from the FCC based on our number of students who receive free or reduced lunches in our county. So that changes from year to year if our numbers change. So we get a certain percentage of our internet paid for by the FCC, and the state of North Carolina picks up the rest of that and gives us that allotment to pay for our internet. We also get a certain portion per student to pay for things like the wireless access points and switches and some of the other things that are hugely important to our network functioning and improving our network services. So CIPA is a requirement to being able to receive those funds. They expanded it in 2008. And in 2012, we were required to have policies in place regarding appropriate online behavior for how kids interact with each other on social networking websites and chat rooms, and providing education on cyberbullying awareness. So if you've wondered why some of those things are blocked, or why you've seen more and more like lesson material and resources coming out about cyberbullying, a lot of it is tied to this legislation. It not only covers schools, but it also covers our public libraries. So public libraries are also eligible to receive these funds. They're not required to, but they are eligible to apply as well. And these are the things that we have to make sure that we take care of, that we protect them from any inappropriate material on the internet, and nothing is 100%. As you know, we make our best effort to try and filter and block as much as possible. Unfortunately, sometimes things do get through, and then we have to respond to that and revise our filters and blocks accordingly. Safety and security of minors using our email, which is why at different levels we have different rights for students to use their Currituck County email. Just know that in some counties, they don't even allow their students at certain grade levels to have electronic email. So we're fortunate in Currituck that we do, but we do have it secured as much as possible, as much as we're comfortable with, to try and protect them and meet this federal requirement. Chat rooms are an issue. A lot of times people will ask for things to be blocked, or kids will even respond in and ask for things to be blocked, and we have to deny that because of chat room features on there. It's part of this Protection Act. And of course, we're also, if you look at the fourth bullet down, we're always looking to keep people's information safe. So schools and libraries, we have to certify that we're CIPA compliant before we receive E-rate funding. Before we even can finish the application process, I have to go through and I have to certify that Currituck County School is meeting these requirements, and so we should be eligible to be considered for those funds. I did include this link here for some tools. If you're not familiar with Common Sense Media, they're a great resource for looking at reviews for different things. A lot of times when we go, first place I go anyway, when I'm looking for reviews for things that people are asking to be added to our network, or to be unblocked, or to use with kids, I will go to Common Sense Media. This is the educational portion of the site, and I just wanted you to see that they have a toolkit here. If you are interested in doing any of these things with your students, there's not a huge variety, and there's certainly other places to go, but I just thought this was a good one to share in case you were interested. And they have them for all different levels, so that the kids would feel that it was, relatable to them, and that the topics were relatable depending on their age group. All right, so go to Student View. I know that was the Cliff Notes version, the down and dirty kind of version of CIPA, but that's the major gist of it. What do you think CIPA stands for if you're doing that interactive version? Yeah, I tried to make it really easy. The interesting thing was when I went back and looked at this one is the first one is actually correct too, but not in the context of what we're discussing. I didn't realize that the acronym in this case meant more than one thing. So that actually is a thing. It's a medical condition when people are incapable of feeling pain and fevers actually. So just a little side note. But yeah, it's the Children's Internet Protection Act. This is COPPA. This is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And the main part of this is just to protect our kids' data, our kids' information online. When those of us from the elementary world would find out about this new wonderful tool and we wanted to use it with our kids, and then we would start looking into it and find out we're not allowed to use it with children under 13, or we had to get parent permission, or so many of the websites now come up and ask for a birth date. If you've noticed more and more, even when you're signing up to use a site, this is where it's coming from. So the federal regulation is that these companies are not allowed to collect and use this data of students under this age. The unfortunate thing is, at least my experience with some of my kids who were good kids, and then just very blatantly would say, well, I'll just change the year on it. And that's like, they just normally do that. We'll just change the year so we can use it. We try to talk to our kids about why that's not a good thing to do, that these protections are there for their safety, and that if they can't use it during that time, then there might be something else that we can use that would be comparable, that would be safe. But it's just to really keep their information private, to not be shared, to not be used, and certainly not without parental consent. When in doubt, it's always the best to make sure the parents know what their kids are doing and have their permission. So a lot of times in my groups, even if it didn't ask for parent permission, I would send a letter home saying we're going to use this. Just wanted you to be aware, make sure that you're okay with it, that sort of thing. It's not, it should never be in condition of a child playing a game, offering a prize, or other activities for them to give personal information. That should be something we teach our kids to look out for as a red flag. I don't think that they're fully aware of the dangers, and we certainly want to, keep them safe and don't want to scare them unnecessarily. But just kind of reiterating, if we can all be on the same page with saying there's certain things to look at when you're online and when you're signing up for things. And if you see these, beware, it's a red flag. Go to an adult, ask them to look at it. You want to make sure that their information is being kept confidential. So one of the things I learned about this website is it will, when you use Nearpod, it will cut it off if you go too far over, but this was supposed to be a matching. So if you could match the CIPA regulation with one of the descriptions and COPPA with one of the descriptions, and let me know what you think. Kathy, are we doing okay?
You are good. You're great.
And I just picked some of those different Nearpod activities just to show you some of the variety. There are a lot of other options in Nearpod for the interactive piece, and Kim Crank did a great job of that when she did her session. I just wanted to put a couple in here because this topic is certainly not the most exciting. FERPA is the next one, Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Again, you can link from there when I share the presentation with you. This just gives parents the right to have access to their records, the rights to seek to have their records amended. Notice the wording. And the right to have some control over the disclosure of who we share that information with. One of the common misconceptions is if a student is still enrolled in our school in high school and they turn 18, that parents still have open access to the records, but that is not the case according to this legislation. Students who turn 18, if they're still in our schools and or they enter, post-secondary institutions, then these rights transfer to the student. So like when my daughter started college, she had to actually give us written permission with the registrar's office for us to have to be able to ask any questions about her records, even though we were helping to pay for her fees. But that is the way FERPA is written. So when students turn 18 or they go to a post-secondary institution, those rights transfer to the student. So what's an educational record? I went on to find out exactly the wording and wanted to be very careful about, trying to paraphrase too much. But records, files, documents, and other materials which contain information directly related to the student. Well, that is a broad definition. That encompasses a lot of things as far as teachers are concerned. So please be aware of that when you're handling your data, your documents, your files. And if they're maintained by, we're an educational agency, so we would fall under that. What an educational record isn't, and I'm not going to read through this again, but you'll have access to this. So these are the things that don't qualify as an educational record, and you would not be required to disclose this or give them a chance to revise this. So obviously law enforcement issues, no longer in attendance, the records are maintained. When the student's 18 years or older and is attending a post-secondary school. So there are all of these different buts to it, and I wanted you to see them. But parents and eligible students have the right to inspect and review students' educational records maintained by the schools. Not everybody's on the same page about this, but this is the way this regulation is worded. Students are not, schools are not required to provide copies, which I always thought we were. But technically, according to this, we're not required to provide copies unless it's a great distance or impossible for parents to view the records in-house. And some schools may charge a fee for those copies. It's my understanding that we do not. Generally, when parents ask for copies of something that constitutes an educational record, we provide that for them. Parents and students over the age of 18 have the right to request, make sure you see that wording, request that a school record could be revised if they think it's inaccurate. That does not mean you are required to do that. If you decide not to change the record, they can request a formal hearing. So if after the formal hearing, and there's a process for that, if the school still decides not to change the record, then they have the right to place a statement along with the record stating their opinion about it. But not that I've had a lot of experience with this personally, but I don't know if some of you have, so I wanted you to see exactly how this was copied directly out of the FERPA Act. And generally, we must have written permission from parents or students over the age of 18 in order to release information. However, we do have these conditions that we can share information without having to get permission from them. And that's why we're able to share CUME folders between ourselves if we are teaching the same students or students from year to year. Other schools, which the student is transferring, that's how our data management department and our school secretaries transfer the records to other schools that are withdrawing and transferring to, or that we're receiving in. And if there's an audit or evaluation, if there's financial aid requested for the student in some way. So all of those reasons are possibilities that we would share the information without having to have that written permission. Again, it's all, you can see the trend here for the federal regulations are all about protection and privacy, individual privacy, and families having rights to who has access to that. Now this one, this directory information, schools can disclose directory information, and the way it was described in a session Kathy and I went to with, I think her name was Marlo Gaddis, the Wake County Tech Director. She described directory information as anything that you would see like in a yearbook or on the web page or posted in like the newspaper. So, you know, how we, I think they still do post, you know, home honor roll lists and things like that. So we would not have to get consent to disclose that. Again, we would be careful about who we share that information in, but we wouldn't have to have consent for sharing that information. Schools must tell parents and eligible students about directory information and allow them a reasonable amount of time to request that the school not disclose it. So we don't have to have consent, but again, it's always best practice just to let the parents or the student, if they're over 18, know that this is what we're doing. Schools must notify parents and eligible students annually of their rights under FERPA. I do believe this is included in most of the school handbooks, if not definitely the county handbook, but there's not like a separate page that goes home to students. So that's where I believe that notification occurs every year. But if you are aware of something different, then maybe we need to make sure that we're covering ourselves there. So how long do you keep records? I included the link to the records retention schedule, and this is a government schedule from the archives department, but not just school specific. They address how long you should keep paper records, electronic records, emails, chats, text, and the difference between archiving and deleting. Again, if it's an educational record, you want to be very, very careful what you do with that information. My email is a hot mess, as most of you know, but I have to be super careful about what I delete, so that I use folders on the side and I use archiving to maintain those records, because if there was ever a need for that or a request. If you're using Google Chat, those records are maintained, and those chats can be archived. So it's better not to delete those either. If you're using your personal cell phone and you're texting an administrator about the student, depending on the context of the text, sometimes that can even be considered an educational record. So it's always better to use email, your school email, to use Google Chat or Google Hangouts, because there's already that paper trail or document, and then to archive it to keep the records. Again, from those of us who've been teaching for a while, you know, we had our paper copies of files from previous years, or old grade books before we transferred to electronic, or student discipline information if we thought it, you know, might be needed later. So just check out what you need to keep and for how long. There are limits to some of it, and some of it, like our records that we convert to electronic form and have to keep, and definitely after kids graduate, are a different animal. All right, so this is a fill in the blank. You're going to actually pull these in. So the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act is commonly referred to as, and then you would pull the word in. It protects what of the student records, and it gives parents certain rights with respect to their kids' educational the rights of these rights blank to the students when they reach 18. So if you're doing the interactive part, you're going to drag and drop those fill in the blanks, see if anybody's doing it. All right, and this was a graphic that I thought when the lady shared it was good enough to include here too. It just shows the difference between what's considered a directory information and what's considered personally identifiable information. Those are things that we definitely do not want to share. And we've had different people who've had different opinions about this. Again, this was from Wake County Schools, and she shared it during PD on privacy. So directory information is okay to share, always best practice to make sure that the parent and or student is aware and doesn't contest that sharing. But personally identifiable information definitely should not be shared out. So hopefully that helps. Now, you may have heard about this Freedom of Information Act. That's been thrown around a lot lately. And it's been in place since the 60s, actually. And if you think back to that time period in our history, it's probably not too much of a leap about why that was started. But it's basically to help citizens stay informed about what's going on with their government. As some people recently have started to use this to try and get certain records from schools. So that's a link up there to the website, and you can actually go in there and fill out an application for the right to receive certain information, and then it will be reviewed. So if you're interested in looking at that, you can, but just know that if somebody comes to you and says that they're trying to get some information and it's underneath this Freedom of Information Act, it's definitely best to talk to your administrator. And the administrator would then probably talk to the superintendent, and then the superintendent would probably talk to the school board attorney about it before anything was shared. So when in doubt, always ask, but know that these things are out there. If you have time to delve into it some more, again, always going to the initial source, the primary document is best, but sometimes they're very, very difficult to read. So when in doubt, ask somebody who you feel is confident in the information, and when we're in doubt, we're always going to contact the school board attorney and ask specifically. Don't ever feel pressured like you have to give something right then. So you doing okay?
Yep. Yep. No questions.
I think they might have nodded off, Kathy. It's not exactly exciting.
Yeah, I think you've just mesmerized them.
Try not to scare anybody either, but it's definitely not exciting content. So some people are feeling pretty well informed now, so that's better. That makes me feel good. I didn't see anybody mark totally overwhelmed. Okay, this last one, I've heard different people say different things about this, even people who've been in positions similar to this much longer than I have, but I was interested to actually go back and read what this refers to. Whenever we go to the doctor and have to, sign off and say, yes, we've read your privacy agreement. Would you like a copy of it? All that stuff. That's this Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That's HIPAA. And it's been around since actually before my daughter was born. So that's basically what this is. It's just talking about who your medical health information can be shared with. You have to give permission for them, the doctor's office, to share that with the insurance company. I have to sign off whether, my husband can have access to my records or call and ask questions about it. So that's where all of this comes from. Where people start talking about it with schools is because we employ school nurses, and I don't know if we have any nurses on here. They might be able to speak more about this than I, but because we employ school nurses and other people who are considered healthcare professionals, some people think that our student information falls under this. Some of our health information falls under this. According to the regulation, it says that schools are not HIPAA covered entities. So it basically applies to health organizations who are filing for reimbursement money transactions for health services covered. So even though we have school nurses and psychologists and other healthcare providers, we're not considered HIPAA covered entities because generally we don't do any billing for healthcare electronically. So most of our schools fall into this category. Where it gets a little trickier is that if you look down to that third bullet, what we maintain as health information is actually called an educational record. So our health information that we keep in our CUME folders and that our nurses maintain is covered under FERPA, but not necessarily under HIPAA. So there's still protection, but it's just a different kind of protection. And I don't think that everybody is clear on that. So again, when in doubt, always keep student information safe, keep it covered. There are some obvious exceptions to this. If we did Medicaid billing, then there would be a possibility of some of those records being protected under HIPAA privacy. So if we have some of those unique situations, then the HIPAA rules would apply. Otherwise, the majority of what we deal with is covered underneath FERPA rules that we would need to make sure that we maintain, allow parent access to, and ask consent if we were going to share it with certain groups. So basically that's it. I know that was like a blur and a lot in 30 minutes. If you want to go back and look at those, regulations, I will include the link to this PowerPoint, and I'll go ahead and share that with you now. It's got the links directly to the regulations for you to go in if you want to see exactly what it looks like. And again, that's up to you. When in doubt, ask your administrator for more clarity. And if they're not sure, then they will go back and ask that they will ask the superintendent and then pass that information along to the school board attorney if we were to need to get more clarity on that. But please don't let people throw the acronyms around and catch you off guard or make you feel uncomfortable. Best case scenario is always to be cautious about what you share. Make sure the parents are aware of what you're sharing. When in doubt, say, I need to check into that and I'll get back to you. And when kids get frustrated about what they can't get to online, understand that it's extremely important that we protect them, just because it's the right thing to do and because it does directly impact some pretty major funding that we need to keep our internet and our network running strongly and make improvements too. So I do appreciate your time. I appreciate that you showed up this morning because it's definitely not the most interesting topic, but I hope that you have found it helpful, and the presentation is linked there. If you need any more information, let us know and we'll try to get that for you. Thank you guys.